Life as an entrepreneur is stressful. Like it just is. It feels like a lot of weight. And the best way to get perspective on all of that is just to laugh. So there will be times of misalignment, like just being honest and clear about it. Like you're not always going to give your family more time than you give your business.
Welcome to the Couplepreneurs Show, where we reverse engineer the success of some of today's most influential power couples in business. Each episode is designed to equip you and your significant other with proven and practical tips and strategies that you can use to grow wildly successful businesses without growing apart as a couple in the process. And today we have a special guest that will help you do just that.
Yeah, so today we are so excited to invite and have on the show Monica Tanner. Monica Tanner, relationship coach and host of the Secrets of Happily Ever After podcast, transforms marriages with simple communication, connection, conflict resolution, and commitment strategies. Her mission is to lower the divorce rate and improve overall marital satisfaction. Through her engaging podcast, vibrant social media community, and practical programs, Monica's expert guidance has impacted thousands of couples by helping them ditch resentment and the roommate syndrome and get back to living their happily ever after love story. Welcome to the podcast, Monica Tanner. So happy to have you.
Oh, so excited to be here. And I loved your podcast description. It sounds like something that's absolutely needed in the world. And I'm so glad you guys are doing it.
Yeah, and we're so glad to have you as someone who can help us fulfill our mission of showing the world that you don't have to choose between having a thriving business or a thriving marriage. You can have both. Yeah. And we know that you and your husband are a wonderful example of that. I know you and your husband worked together in his business, grew it to a certain degree. Now he runs one business, you run a different business. So I think that our listeners who are listening, whether you run a business together with your significant other or you own a separate business, there's going to be some things that we talk about today that you can relate to in either scenario. So Monica, first of all, how you doing today?
Oh my gosh, I'm so good. It's been a great day.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. All right, so we do have a couple questions for you. Yeah. And we're really excited about this because for the people who don't know Monica Tanner yet, she's a good friend of ours at this point that we've gotten to meet through, Russell Brunson's events, and we were featured on her podcast, which is amazing. And it's just an honor for us to bring her on to ours to really share with other people some proven practices for actually doing this thing called couplepreneurship. Yeah. So let's start with this. Monica, when you think about just the relationship dynamic you've had with your husband and the businesses that you both have grown, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've overcome and seen in your own relationship, as well as the challenges that you've helped other couples overcome as well?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this question because I feel like we've learned so much from challenges, right? Like it's not like we just knew what we were doing when we got married. It was like we went challenge after challenge after challenge to get it figured out. And I feel like we're in a good spot now, but I mean, challenges always come. I mean, that is, very much the only certain thing in life is change, right? Like something's coming. If you're getting too comfortable, it means something's coming for you. So I love the question about challenges because where do we even start with the challenges we've overcome? I mean, my husband and I, when we got married, we're both very entrepreneurial. We started the business that he was in when we met. So basically what happened was he came down to Austin to sell pest control. So he was a pest control salesman when we met. Okay. And I always talk about the best contract he sold was the lifetime plan to me, right? And so he pulled me into this lifetime of the pest control business. We got married, he finished up school, and then we started our own pest control business. And it worked out great because when we were first married, I worked in the office and he sold it. So we kind of got to see a lot of the business together. And so just naturally, when we graduated and we're looking for a way to support our family, we're like, what can we do in this place in which we want to live, which was Boise. So we picked our location first, and then we're like, how can we support a family here? And we knew pest control really well. And we got the blessing of the person that we worked for that was in Texas. So we weren't like competing anywhere or anything like that. And so we started this pest control business together, and we made a lot of mistakes, and we learned really quickly that we have very different personality types. We do things very differently. I'm very type A, very organized. And he's like, leave little pieces of paper with little notes on them all over the place. And like, maybe she'll find them, maybe she won't. Right. And so it was very interesting starting a business together where I'm like working in the office and trying to like, be organized and create systems. And he's like fly by the seat of his pants, like do all the things. And so, we made a lot of mistakes just in like figuring out how we operate and and figuring out how to, instead of just be frustrated all the time with how our brains work differently from each other, how to figure out, okay, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, and how do we put this together so I can kind of be over the things that I'm over and you can be over the things that you're over, and we don't kill each other, right? So that was the first several years. And then what happened was we started building a successful pest control business. And it was very interesting because about 6 months out of the year is when we made our money. And about 6 months of the year is when very little happened. So for 6 months of the year, he was gone working like all the time and money was coming in. And then the other 6 months of the year, he was home in my space, and we were like, money was tight. And so we had to learn to like live in this cyclical way that entrepreneurship often is, especially in the beginning. And so that caused a lot of friction, and we needed to learn how to communicate really well, because I was like, I love you, but you're cramping my style. Like, how can we, make some space between us so that you're not always at home? Like, I'm running my household the way I'm used to running it when you're not here. And then you come home and you're like, right in my way. So a lot of communication came there, but also what happened is we started having a lot of kids. And so now I'm full-time mom. I have 3 little children. My part of the business was very, ran on deadlines. Like, I'm paying people, and people get really grumpy if I'm a couple days late with payroll because I had a sick baby or something. Right. And so it got to the point where I was like, listen, you got to pull me out of this business or hire someone to run our household or put me in the funny farm, because I can't do all of it. And so that was kind of the beginning of really figuring out how to ask for what we needed more, try to set boundaries, be real clear about like, I can't do this. It's not that I don't want to, but there's just so much. So that year I joke that I got the best Christmas present ever, which was a bookkeeper for our business. And then after that, an accountant and a payroll. And, we started outsourcing and like figuring out how we could make our family life work with our business. And that's something that I think you guys teach people how to do, but I really specialize in the emotionality of that, because there's a lot that goes into figuring out when things change, and when you're running a household, your marriage needs to come first, right? And then your children, and then your business. But a lot of people get that very backwards, and they think, oh, I'll focus on my family or my kids when I reach this level of success. And I hear that so much, like, oh, we just don't have time right now for date night or all of those things, because we're in the thick of starting our business. And that's important. And they always say, but I have to do this for my family. But that's a big fat trap. And so I think probably of all the lessons we learned, the most significant and important was you've got to put your marriage and your family first and let your business support that, and not the other way around.
Yeah, I wanna expand on that a lot more, because I think we're totally with you there. We see so many couples that, like you said, there's this like imaginary benchmark that once they reach that benchmark, then everything else will be bumped up in priority. But usually what happens is the same patterns that you've developed to get to that level of success are going to continue once you've reached that level of success. And there's never going to be that right time, so to speak, to then transition to focusing on your family or your relationship versus maybe the business.
In addition, I think a lot of people who are listening to this who are parents, what you might actually experience in your life as well. We've seen so many couples go through this, where they sacrifice all of their time building a business for the family. But at the end of the day, your kids never asked you to build the business. Like, you're doing a good, honorable thing by growing the business. But if you're taking all of the time away from your family to build the business, and then you tell them you're doing it for them, sometimes that could actually put undue shame and blame on your family who didn't even ask you to do it in the first place. So there's so many problems that are immediately solved the second that you put your marriage and your family first before the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said that really well. And I often tell this story of, I met a woman at a networking event, kind of like the way we met. And I remember telling her what I did. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I wish I had known you about 20 years ago." And she said, "I remember when I was young and we had, one child and I was in the middle of building my business." And she said, I was crossing the street with my family and this bus turned the corner and almost hit us. And we got to the other side. And my husband was just said something like, "If that bus was going to hit us, you would have saved the baby and your business and you would have let me just get hit by the bus." And she said years and years went on like that. She's like, "I knew it was kind of a wake up call, but I didn't really do anything about it." And she's like, the years went on. And just like you said, Ariel, it was like this imaginary benchmark. And we created those patterns for so many years. And she said, by the time I sold my business, my husband was out. And she's like, "So what you're doing is really important." And I was like, yeah, I mean, I can understand that because you do create those patterns and, the business needs to serve the family. And it's really hard when you're telling yourself the story that we need money. Like, I need to be able to support my family. I got to make this work so that I can have my family. But what happens when you get there? Like, what happens when you sell the business and your family's like, "Peace out."
Yeah.
Yep. I was also going to say there's another thing in your story too that I think a lot of people listening can relate to, which is the fact that you and your spouse, while you're working together, you recognize very quickly that y'all are different. That you operate completely differently. And for the most successful couples that we've gotten to be around and to coach and just call our friends, they all go through this period of time where they start to transition from recognizing those differences as hindrances to starting to recognize and leverage those differences as strengths in their business. And you guys did it. And typically, Monica's example is very common, where one spouse is more of the free-flowing, spontaneous, disorganized person, and then the other spouse is much more type A, organized.
It's literally what drew you together in the first place. Like, let's be honest, right? Opposites attract. That's a real thing.
Exactly.
But yeah, if you try to put it into a business together, it causes some friction until you can figure it out.
Yeah. So I appreciate you sharing that. Yes. So whether it's prioritizing your family first or really navigating those differences, you guys have done that so well. And I think a lot of people can really relate to that.
Yeah. And Monica, one of the reasons why we were so excited to have you on the show is because you have such a unique dynamic of being an entrepreneur couple, as we, couplepreneur, we call them, yourself. And then you also work with them. You also have that very third party perspective of getting to work with other couples and a lot of entrepreneur couples and seeing those different dynamics and how they work together and the challenges that come up for them specifically. So, we started off by talking about some of the challenges that you maybe experienced yourself. I'm curious, what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen other entrepreneurial couples go through that maybe are a little different from other relationships?
Yeah. So I think one of the most important things is creating sacred spaces, and that's being able to separate your family life from your business life. Because the unique thing about being an entrepreneur is the buck stops at you. There's no clock in, clock out. It's like always with you. You're always problem solving your business. So let's be honest, it's hard to turn that off. Yes. But you're also always a parent, you're always a spouse. And so one of the things that I think is really important is being able to separate I like to do it in a very physical way, when is work time and when is family time and when is like romantic being with your spouse time. And so I always tell the story of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. That's, you guys are young, so I'm probably totally dating myself, but there was a show when I was growing up called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And Mr. Rogers would come in, the door. It was how the whole show started. And he would take off his blazer and he would put on his house sweater and he would take off his loafers and put on, some slippers. And it was kind of a physical representation that he was leaving whatever outside, whatever occupation he was or whatever. And he was coming in the house to be with the show or whatever. Yeah. And so I like to come up with things like that for my business as well. And so I'm glad I'm wearing them because I'm legit wearing my pajamas. You don't know this, but when I am working, I'm always wearing a pair of dangly leather earrings. That's kind of my significant physical reminder that I'm on camera or I'm coaching couples or I'm, producing videos or whatever it is I'm doing. And when I get finished with that for the day, when my kids start to come home from school, I take these earrings off and I go and it's my physical representation that I'm no longer working with clients. I'm no longer creating content. I am a mom. And then I have a different set of clothes that I put on when the kids go to bed and it's time for me to have some sexy time with my husband. It's a very physical representation of those sacred spaces. And so that's one of the most important skills I would say for entrepreneurial couples is to have some sort of delineation between I'm working on my business, I'm at home now.
I love it too, because it's so practical that everybody can do this. And whether you are in business together with your spouse or just in a relationship period, this is really, really helpful because we all have our mental modes of being in work mode, which is very different than family time, which is very different than sexy time. So how do we transition from one to the next when all aspects of those things are a part of our lives? Like what Monica said, one of the easiest ways to transition from each of those modes is to change something physically, whether it's like putting on a different shirt or earrings or a jacket or a dress if we're going on date night, or there's just changing little things about your physical appearance or your physical environment triggers those memories and triggers those similar emotions that put you into the different mood. It's just so practical and everyone can do that. So Monica, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, I've got another one if you do.
Let's go.
So I think another really important thing for entrepreneurs is creating a shared vision, which is different than having the same goals.
Right.
So specifically, because my husband and I work in different businesses, our goals are very different. His KPIs are very different from mine, right? And so we create a shared vision, which is something that's important to us for our family. But even if you work in the same business, you want to have a shared vision for your business and a shared vision for your family. And what's cool about knowing that is specifically in your family is that you can get buy-in from your children, right? So there will be times of misalignment, like just being honest and clear about it. Like you're not always going to give your family more time than you give your business. You don't always want to give your business more time than you want to give your family, but there's going to be seasons. So like when you're in a big push or a launch or something like that, it's good to point those things out to your kids and your family and your spouse so that everybody has a little bit of buy-in and knows what's going on. And I remember the first time this happened when I was very first starting my business, and my husband, you could tell he wasn't super on board yet. It was kind of a jobby. I wasn't making any money, but I was really pushing hard. And I remember the first time that he really showed me a lot of support. We have these family meetings on Sundays. And that's when, we go over the kids' sports and their schedules and what mom and dad are doing and who's driving who where and all of those things. And Ben knew that I was launching my first 5-day challenge. You guys, I'm sure, very familiar with how much time and effort that takes, right? And I was really nervous and I was explaining to him how I'm okay, I'm going to go live for 5 days and I don't know how many people are going to be there. And I'm going to have to be in the Facebook group, engaging with everybody. And I just don't know what this is going to look like. Right. And so in our family meeting on Sunday, he said, all right, kids, guess what? mom is doing her first 5-day challenge to try and get some coaching clients. And so this week's going to look a little bit different. Like you might have to get yourself cereal for dinner. I want you guys to do your own laundry. Like we're going to help mom in this big push that she has. And it took so much stress off of me, but it became this shared vision. Like the whole family is like, Mom, how's your challenge going? Or like, they understood that I was focusing more. I was in a season of misalignment for my business. But then when it was over, I could go back to doing all the things. And then, the kids were really supportive. And so creating that joint vision, like being really communicative with each other about what's going on, why it's important, and expressing that there is an end date. Like it's a 5-day challenge. Look, for this 5 days, mom's going to be a little crazier than normally, but at the end of the 5 days, she's going to return to mom mode and everyone's going to be happy again. Right. So it's like really communicating and sharing your vision with those people that are important to you. Even when they're 5, they can understand like, okay, 5 days is going to be crazy, but this is for this vision that mom has. And her goals are different, right? My goals in that moment were very different than the rest of the families. But even when your goals are different, when you share your vision, they can buy in.
I love that so much. Monica, I don't know, are you familiar with the show called The Office?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay. There's I've said this before, but there is a specific episode where Pam and Jim, he's working really hard towards like this career that he's really excited about. And he's kind of detracting. It's when he's pursuing like the sports business.
Athlete.
Anyway, he's pursuing this career really hard, and he's kind of neglecting, so to speak, Pam and the family. And I remember he's talking to somebody who's kind of counseling him, and one of the questions that they said to Jim was like, "Well, what's the end date?" And Jim was like, well, yeah, but like they'd have to hold on a little while longer while I grow this business because I'm doing it for them. And then the person was like, but what's the end date? How can you expect your family to go along with it when they don't know when that season is going to end? And I loved how you brought that up, because I remember watching that episode even years ago with like us in our business. And for like, tend to have some workaholic sort of tendencies. I'm one of those people that I get very fixated on something. And I remember even just watching that episode, I had that that moment of shock of like, oh yeah, I should maybe like communicate these things to Kyle. And so now we kind of even do this just like periodically, where we'll say like, hey, right now, what season are we in? And then we'll go from there. And like, we communicate what are the expectations on both of our ends in this season, and like, what's the end date? And we both are very clear on that. So anyway, I'm just very glad that you brought that up, because I think that's so important.
Yeah. Toby, I think, gave that advice. Yes. That was one of the best things. Toby
wow. Toby.
Yeah.
That's really significant. And I remember learning that real early in my marriage, the concept of you can do anything if you know that there's an end date. Because when Ben and I first got married, we went straight down to Texas to sell pest control together. This is like, we'd met when he was doing it, but we were together now married. And the schedule was grueling. I worked in the office from like 7 to 5 or something, and he wouldn't come till, because he sold, so he would go at 11 and work till like 11. And so the window in which we would see each other was like 11 to the 6 or 7 in the morning, right? And so I was tired, he was tired, we were getting like and we were just fresh, newly married. And I remember just like falling apart one day. I was like, this is not what I signed up for. It's not what I envisioned in marriage. Like, I never see you. This is horrible. And I remember him saying, if you can just hold on, like just another month, we'll be at school and everything will look all different. Right. And I was like, oh, and I was like, in the moment, I just didn't have that perspective at all. That like, I just thought that's how it is. And so communicating like, okay, this is a season. Yes. And if we can get through this season, it's going to look very different. And being clear about that too.
Yes.
Yeah, it's important too, because even when it comes to business growth, as people watching this or listening to this, can attest to, different seasons of business growth require different levels of focus, intentionality, strategic alignment, et cetera. So knowing what season of business you're in is very important, and then communicating that with the family and making sure everybody's aligned on what the season is and when the season is targeted to end, I think will alleviate so much tension.
Yeah.
I mean, we've experienced that too.
For sure.
Even just what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Just knowing, okay, hey, this season is the seasons of growth, which sometimes can lead to us working 6 days a week. And we have other seasons where we can kind of not like coast, because we never are coasting, but just relax a little bit more, maybe prioritize even more time together, maybe prioritize even more time with the family, and just recognizing the season you're in and communicating that, I think is huge. Because I think a lot of people go through this, they just don't talk about it, and it creates a lot of tension.
Yeah.
So good.
Monica, I want to like shift gears just slightly, because one of the things that we love about what it is that you do is your focus on like establishing intimacy. And when it comes to entrepreneurial couples and that relationship, one of the things even in our own personal story is we went through a period right after we got married where we felt like we were very much just roommates and very much like business. We weren't even in business together at that time. We had separate businesses, but like business partners, we just talked about business and goals and numbers and all the stuff. So it was like that roommate. I've heard you talk about it as the roommate rut, right? So what are some of the key things that you like entrepreneurial couples can do to stay out of that roommate rut and stay more intimately connected as an actual couple?
Yeah. That's such a great question. And there's a couple different ways we could go. So you steer me in which way you think would be best for the audience. But one way I think is really important is establishing bumpers. And those are like kind of non-negotiables. But I think you guys talk about that really well. Like there's date nights and daily connections and making sure that you're checking in, those types of things. So we can just brush over that really simply, just setting up bumpers, like expectations, things that you're not willing to give up, right? So 3 hours a week, you should be going on a date. 20 minutes a day, you should be connecting in a non-business, non-kids, non-stuff kind of way. You're getting to know each other's inner worlds, right? So you're asking, what are you excited about? What's stressing you out? What are things I can do to make your life easier? What book are you reading that just really gets you going, right? So those types of conversations, 20 minutes a day, we call these stress relieving conversations because you go from an area of stress and it relieves so much stress to just know that somebody sees you and they know what you're thinking, and you can just be who you are in that moment with that person. So making sure you're going on date nights, you're having stress relieving conversations every single day, those types of things. So establishing those bumpers. But then the other thing I was going to say specifically for entrepreneurs is to remember to always be asking for what you want. And I know this sounds a little bit crazy, but there is a specific skill set that I teach couples for how to ask for more of what you want in your marriage. Because as an entrepreneur, you're the leader. You have people that are working for you. You're paying people to legit do the things you want them to do. And if they don't do it, you fire them. And that you get used to that type of relating with people. But your spouse is very different. They don't work for you. They're not paid to figure out what it is that you want and how you want it done. And so you have to communicate in a different way to your spouse what you want. And the first principle of this is you can never be upset about not getting something that you didn't ask for. This is how a lot of resentment starts in a lot of couples, is they're just like, well, he should just know, or why is it so hard for her to do this? My first question is always, did you ask them to do that? Is that something they know that you want them to do, right? So the first thing is to never be upset about something you didn't ask for. And the second thing is to learn how to ask for what it is that you want. This includes making requests. So you don't control the people you're married to the way you can control your employees. So you have to make requests, and you have to make them specific, behavioral, time-bound. So when you go to your spouse and you say, hey, I would really love it if we could prioritize date night more. This is what I feel like this could look like. And do the work to figure out what it is that you want out of your relationship, not just what you don't like or what you're upset about. So one of the things I teach about this is under every single complaint is a request. So anytime you're feeling frustrated, like, we're not spending enough time together, or I hate how Kyle's always leaving his coffee mug out, or whatever it is, whatever complaint you're coming up with about your spouse. Did I nail it?
You did. Actually.
For sure. Yeah.
Major
Whatever
coffee drinker.
complaint you're coming up with on a regular basis, you can turn that into a request. So how can I ask for more of what I want to my spouse, but remembering that it is a request? They don't have to do it. And then we talk about, we learn these skill sets. The final thing is once you make a request and your spouse makes any type of progress. So if the coffee mug went from the desk to the counter, even though you asked him to wash it and put it in the dishwasher, we want to encourage and acknowledge the progress. That, like, thank you for not leaving your coffee mug on the desk. I love that you brought it all the way to the counter. Let's keep going. What if we washed it out and now put it in the dishwasher? That would be so awesome. But I'm so proud of you for moving it from the desk to the countertop. I really appreciate that. Right. Yes. So those are the 3 steps: is owning your desires, asking for what you want, and then encouraging any type of progress.
That is
and
so
then
good.
We talk about negotiating. How do you handle it when your spouse doesn't do what you ask them to do? Because that's going to happen too. The nature of request means you're not controlling it. That doesn't mean they have to do it. But how can we now negotiate? Okay, if you're not going to do this, can we come up with something else that would help with this need or complaint that I'm feeling?
Yeah.
I'm glad that you addressed that, because that was going to be my next question, is like, well, what happens when, those requests aren't met or aren't met on a consistent basis? Because we see a lot of, even the couples that we work with, where it's like, well, my partner does this and I've asked them to change it and it doesn't change. And so I'm glad that you addressed that. That's a really interesting take on it, for sure.
And I love how practical everything you just said is. Like, that 3-step process is so helpful and so healthy too. Because look, if you're listening to this podcast right now, or you're watching this video, just think about something in your life where you may, if you're honest with yourself, have just a little bit of resentment towards your spouse about. Let that resentment not just fester and fuel into more resentment. Use that as a trigger to identify what requests can I uncover that comes with this, and then have the courage to have the conversation, voicing that request to your spouse. And then also loving them enough to recognize that they may not always do what it is that you request, but at least you got your voice out there, and you work towards a solution rather than just wallowing in the problem.
And here's an important piece of that too. When you're making a request, you can also add, what can I do to make this easier for you? Right? So like, if your request is, I would like to stop working at 6 o'clock every single night, right? And your partner's like, oh, I'm just not sure. I mean, I usually have work that flows into about 7, right? You can now say, what can I do to make it easier for us to stop working at 6? So does that mean I take on another responsibility so that you're not having to do it past 6 o'clock? Or does that mean we wake up an hour earlier? Like, what can I do to make it easier for you to come through for me? And then we both win.
I love this, because as you're speaking, I'm thinking about times in our own couplepreneur relationship where we've had to kind of learn these lessons the hard way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so everybody listening, please take Monica's advice, follow her steps, because I promise you, it is going to save you a lot of time and pain and energy, specifically around making requests. Maybe somebody listening to this was in a position where I was for many, many months, where there were certain things that were not aligning with my expectations of how our relationship was going, if I could be so bold to say. Specifically around the intimacy department. And for me, I have in my mind, like, oh, well, Ariel's not doing this, and I really wish in our relationship we could spice things up and do these things. But at the same time, I don't want to voice them because I don't want to offend her. I don't want to make her feel like she's not enough. I don't want to, go down that route. And so I just battled in my own mind for months and months and months. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this is I'm sure there's somebody that's listening who probably has a request that they want to make, but feels either ashamed of it or afraid to voice it, be it that it would be met with criticism or even like,
or to like offend the other person.
To offend. So I'm curious, Monica, like to go even deeper into that. Have you ever experienced that before? And if so, how would you suggest navigating through that?
Yeah. And this is the stuff that intimacy is made of. It's the messy, messy stuff, right? It's hard to go to your partner and say, I have this request, right? You might be ashamed of it. You might be embarrassed. You might, really worry about what they're going to think about it, right? But the cost, you've got to think about the cost of an action. Is me walking around resenting my partner and they don't even know? Or is it me capturing all of those complaints? Because this is a really healthy thing to do in relationship. Like, I'm frustrated about this and this and this. Don't bring that to your partner because that is going to get a reaction you don't like.
Right.
Distill it into a request. Hey, Ariel, I'm really feeling disconnected. I feel like it's been a long time since we've been physically intimate with each other. And I would love it if we could 3 times a week make some time that is only for us to be physically intimate with each other. Nothing gets in the way of that. And then Ariel can say, I can see how you might feel that way. I don't think I can do 3 times a week, but maybe if we schedule twice a week and then we make sure we're going on date night, would that help you feel better? Absolutely. I love that, Ariel. Thank you so much for being willing to work with me. What can I do to make sure that we're really connecting that 3 times a week? Would you like me to put it into our shared calendar? Do you want me to plan the things? Do you want me to make a schedule where you can plan some and I can plan some? It's working together and collaborating. It's problem solving, but it's doing it in a way that's not, here are all the things I have to complain about. You do the work, figure out what those requests are and what those intentions behind the requests are. And that's what you're communicating to your partner.
I love that so much. Everybody, please take notes. Please do this. And Monica, what would you say to somebody who maybe is afraid to voice the request?
Yeah.
You're not doing anyone any favors.
Yeah, that's very
You're really
true.
not. You're just killing intimacy in a very slow, painful death.
Yeah.
If you're not getting what you want in your relationship, get back in the ring toe to toe. That's the highest form of respect for the person you're with, is to be able to continuously ask for what you want.
That right there.
Yeah.
Mic drop. That right there, I think is so important for it's important for all of us to just be reminded of, but I just feel like there's somebody that's going to listen to this that is going to feel so empowered and encouraged to step through that fear of making requests known to their spouse. And when you bring those things out from the darkness and into the light, that's when you actually have a chance to transform your life for the better and your marriage. Along those lines, just to go even deeper, because we're not surface level people, Monica. We like to dive into the deep, dirty stuff. Are there different approaches to initiating intimacy that you've seen work between, let's call it a male approach, like how a man might approach initiating more intimacy with their wife, or how a wife may approach initiating more intimacy with her husband? Is there a difference there?
That's really an interesting question. I mean, I wouldn't even say that there's a difference that's along the lines of husband versus wife, but just different people are different. They have different levels of comfort levels, different experience levels, different preference levels of how they would want to initiate and experience intimacy. So I think one of the most important things to think about there is to leave space in your relationship to be able to talk about it. So one of the things I always ask my couples to do is come up with a weekly time where you can intimacy is such an important part of your relationship. Now, when I'm saying intimacy, I'm talking about all of them, but I think we're talking more about physical, sexual intimacy.
Yeah.
I think walking is the best way to tackle a topic such as physical intimacy. It's really intimidating to look at your partner in the eyes, like, across the table or, on the couch, and you're looking into each other's eyes and you're having these kind of uncomfortable situations. So I say, go for a walk, like on Tuesday, have like a Tuesday sex talk day, and you go for a walk together and you just start broaching these topics. What is your experience with this? I have a questionnaire that, people fill out to start to think about, like, what were they taught about it? Like, what were their experiences? How did they experience their parents' intimacy or otherwise, right? Like, where did they learn certain things? What was their first experience with, any form of sexual contact or whatever, right? And so getting to know each other, your experiences, your limitations, your fears, your stresses, all of those things around sexual intimacy in a like an active walking in one direction together, holding hands type of way is a really great way to start that, but always be talking about that. Like most of the couples that I actually work with are entering the stage of life of empty nesting, meaning they've kind of oriented their family around their children for so long, and then their children leave. And all of a sudden they're like, we've got to figure out how to be with each other all the time. And, all of these things are different. And typically sexual intimacy is a huge changing forms in that period of time. And, there's the parents are aging and kids are leaving the house, and a lot of people are selling or getting out of their careers or things like that. So lots of things are changing, but intimacy is changing too, right? Somebody either wants it more or wants it less or wants it different, or they're finally getting to the point where they're like, there's no kids. Like, you can't use that excuse anymore. Like what? So, all throughout your life and all the different stages, it's important to open up that line of communication. And it's going to be messy at first. It's going to be awkward. Like, it's not going to just free flow. But if you just keep practicing and you can just keep showing up to that conversation, it's going to get easier.
Love it. So, along the lines of like sexual intimacy, because I think this is such an interesting topic when it comes to couples, obviously. I think, what do they say? Like the biggest challenges or issues in relationships are like communication, money, and sex, right? And it's usually those three things. I don't know if there's a specific study on this or not. I might just be pulling this from things I've seen, but so along the lines of sexual intimacy, when it comes to entrepreneurial couples, is there anything in particular that you see really stand in the way for entrepreneurs specifically?
Ooh, that's kind of a layered question, because entrepreneurs are busy. Like, stress is huge for entrepreneurs, and stress is a real big damper on your sexual intimacy. So it's just mitigating and managing that stress. And so it's also changing sexuality into the frame of a way to serve each other and replenish each other too. So instead of having it be an additional thing on your to-do list, like, okay, I've got to run my business, I got to take care of my kids, and I have to service my partner who wants sex all the time. It's like, how can we meet in a way and really serve each other in a way that's replenishing and rejuvenating, and where we can show up to this place and be safe to really take care of each other and give each other pleasure in a way that, instead of taking from each other, we're feeding each other and giving each other more energy to take on all of the other responsibilities that we have.
Oof, that was such a good answer, because, I'm sure, Monica, you've seen, but there's like the concept of like duty sex, right? Or it's just adding in as like another thing to the list of tasks and responsibilities and demands, right? And so that was such a good answer, and such a simple, like almost mindset shift around what it is.
And entrepreneurs will because they say, like, if you have a great sex life, you're going to produce more. So it's easier for like an entrepreneur to be like, well, it's like taking my vitamins, going to the gym, having sex. Like, I got to do all these things so I can run my business really well, right? So you definitely want to get out of that frame, because it's hard to get your body on board when you're like, I just got to do this to service my business or whatever, right? You've got to change the frame, right? How can this be something that's really replenishing and nourishing to me?
Love that. Awesome.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, it challenges even me as I'm listening to this to not look at certain things in life as like just a checkbox in order to make things more efficient. Because, you could even argue that like, hey, if your sex life is on fire, you could see the positive ROI in that in your income and in your revenue, but still, we're still in that mind frame of like,
yeah, you're an entrepreneur.
If
you're using sex to drive your KPIs, then you're probably an entrepreneur.
Let's go.
Yeah, I was gonna say like you said, Monica. I think entrepreneurs are very like efficiency driven and very like processy driven, or just their brain is all over the place, and so to bring it back to like that presence is also kind of hard. But but anyway, I love the mindset shift. It's just so good.
Yeah. Another thing too, Monica, that I remember you talking about one time that really resonated with me just even a couple of years ago was like you gave such an easy task for husbands to do to make things easier for their wives to be more interested in intimacy. And that one thing you said was look for ways that you could take more off of their shoulders. So for me, I've never forgot that because actively in my own life, I'm always thinking about Ariel. And I'm like, okay, well, if I want more intimacy, I can also think about, okay, what is on Ariel's shoulders right now? What pressure is she experiencing? Is there anything that I can do? Back to that question, right?
Yes.
What can I do to support and take more pressure off of her shoulders, which I think in turn will lead to a much more, I guess, appropriate environment for us to engage in other intimacy. Yeah. And you know what's interesting?
Because typically men are very spontaneous sex drive. So it means like you can be in the middle of budgeting and you can be like, well, it's time to have sex right now. Whereas Ariel's got like all these tabs open on her computer and she's like, okay, I got to take care of this. I got to take care of this. It's very hard for her, typically for women, to get into your body and into whatever's happening until all these tabs are closed down. So like you said, what can you take off her plate? It's not even necessarily like, what can you do? Like, I'm going to do the dishes. I'm going to clean the house. I'm going to like, husbands, I think, get really caught up in like, I'm going to do all the things and then she'll have to be ready for sex. It's like, no, help your spouse close down the tabs. And a lot of times that means, I laugh because I'm like, yes, love, if you want to have sex right now, I need to have like a 20-minute conversation to get all of these tabs closed in my brain. And then we can have amazing sex. We can even be naked while we're having the conversation. For me, I have to close down the tabs. I have to like be able to say goodnight and close out like all of the things that are processes that are running in my brain to have the energy to be present during sex. Now we joke, there's all different kinds of sex. So like sometimes there's just like, I can be playing on my phone and like, I'm like, is that the kind of sex we want to have now? Because that'll work, right? Or whatever, or like it can be quickie sex or whatever. But if you want to have like a connecting experience where I'm present and I'm here, then I'm going to need some help to close down these tabs. And whatever that looks like for you as a couple, that's one of those things that you walk and talk about, right?
100%. Well, I had to say that after just that little shift of me implementing that myself, it did work. For everybody listening, like look for ways that you can close tabs for your partner. And
I was going to say he did well, Monica.
Yes, good. And it's not always the women. Like we always get the bad rap with the tabs, but sometimes men are really stressed out with something at work, right? And so just to be able to sit and talk and connect for a few minutes and like, let your partner in, your wife in on like all the things that are stressing you out, that also creates a great environment. So just remember, like, how can you help your spouse close down tabs so they can be emotionally, physically, and sexually available for whatever activity is coming next?
Love it.
That is so good. Monica, you've said so much wisdom in this entire episode today. Like there are so many things that somebody listening to this can take and go implement, whether it is having a physical cue to trigger different modes, whether it's work mode or romance mode or family time, etc., or whether it is aligning on your priorities or the vision as a family as to what season you're in, even down to how to have really vulnerable conversations that transforms resentment into actual intimacy and working together again on getting your requests made, to even this, like looking for tabs to close in your partner's mind in order to foster an environment of deeper intimacy. That's amazing. And like,
I wish I could, like, you were like a way better version of ChatGPT. Like you just took our whole conversation and like nuggetized it. That was really good. I'm
He's
impressed.
very good at that.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I think Ariel told me that that's a gift of
It is. It absolutely is.
I just love it because I love hearing people that are just masters at their craft and just like synthesizing it into something that we can all do. And I think anybody listening to this, whether you and your significant other work together or you work separately, you can implement every single one of these things.
Yeah.
They're all free. By the way, they don't cost you anything. That's just the only cost is your intention. In fact, I would argue it costs you a lot more not to do these things than to just simply take forth the action to do them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't try to do everything. Just take one or two things and try to implement them and see how they go. And then return and listen to this episode a couple more times.
Exactly.
Love it.
Exactly. Now, you were going to say something?
Oh, go for it.
I was going to say one last question for you, Monica. Mm-hmm. I know we've talked about all of those amazing things that any one of them could drastically change somebody's life. But I want to just ask you one last question. If you were to step in front of an audience full of entrepreneur couples and you just could give them one piece of advice, just one thing, doesn't have just one thing that could maybe increase the intimacy and enjoyment of life between the two entrepreneurs in one relationship, what advice would you give them?
This is going to be so simple and maybe not the most profound, but make time to laugh, because when you laugh together, you imprint on each other. And life as an entrepreneur is stressful. Like it just is. It feels like a lot of weight. And the best way to get perspective on all of that is just to laugh. So find a favorite comedian, watch a romantic comedy together, go to a comedy show, like just find ways to lighten the load with laughter. I think the older I get, the more value I place on just, or try an activity together that neither of you have ever done before. That will create some laughter. Just find ways to do something fun and unusual and laugh and just enjoy each other. Because at the end of the day, if you're not laughing, then your life is too serious. My mom always says this, and it took me a long time to appreciate it, but she always said, life is too important to take so seriously. And I think that really hit me because I am a serious person. Like when I learn about something, I obsess about it. Like I want to understand it. I want to, like everything about it. And she always would say this to me, life is too important to take so seriously. And I think I finally, at the age of 45, am starting to understand that there is nothing that a little bit of laughter can't make better.
I love that. Even us, like after, we're done with work for the day, one of the things that we found ourselves like gravitating towards is we don't watch a ton of TV, but we do use it strategically. And one of those is like stand-up comedians. We're very drawn to watching things that are very lighthearted, that make us laugh, because I feel like our day-to-day is so much of solving problems, checking boxes, and making sure other people are taken care of. Where when we have that time where we're laughing together, it actually is something that pours back into us. So Monica, thank you for sharing that. That's good.
Yeah. And I was just thinking we need to start rewatching The Office because it's been years since I watched it. And I laugh so hard when I watch it.
That show is just a work of art. So I'm curious if anyone's listening, if you are an Office fan, let us know. That gives you brownie points for sure.
Send us a message on Instagram and say The Office, and we'll know what you mean.
Yeah, that's right.
Or Schitt's Creek. If you, send me a notice that says Schitt's Creek. I need to watch that over again too, because there are just shows that make life funny. They just make light of normal everyday life stuff that are so good.
Agreed.
100% agree. Well, speaking of that, if someone was going to send you a message about Schitt's Creek, what would be the best way for them to connect with you? Because I know there are people listening that they just want more Monica. They want more of this wisdom. I mean, guys, if you're listening to this, if you can imagine, this was just, a conversation that was a short conversation diving into topics that Monica is a master about. So if you really want to learn more about growing intimately with your spouse and how to have fun together, you definitely want to connect with Monica. So if they wanted to connect with you, Monica, where's the best place to do that?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that so much. So the easiest way to find me is my website is monicatanner.com, just my name, monicatanner.com. And there you can find my podcast, which is Secrets of Happily Ever After. I have a YouTube channel with the same name. And I actually have something for your audience that I think would just be amazing. And we touched on a couple of the topics, but it's called 5 Golden Laws of Married Entrepreneurship. And it just is 5 things that as a married entrepreneur are just really important. One of them is having a shared vision. Another one is creating those sacred spaces, right? And you can just go to monicatanner.com/5 golden laws. And it's just a downloadable little thing right there that will give you some really good things to put in place so that you enjoy being married entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. I would recommend everybody who's listening to this to go to that link. So it's monicatanner.com/5 golden laws. Is it the number 5 or is it 5 spelled out?
The number 5, yeah.
The number 5. Perfect. So number 5 golden laws. Everybody go check that out. You will absolutely love it.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes as well. But I think that's a perfect way to take a lot of the wisdom, Monica, that you shared and synthesize at least some of it into like a real tangible thing that people can work off of. So
that's right. Monica, thank you so much for being here on the show. We are so glad to have you. We love the work that you are doing. And everybody else that's watching, let this be a reminder that you do not have to choose between having a successful and thriving business or a successful and thriving marriage. You can have both. And we appreciate you all for being role models in this generation to show the reality that that is true. And for that reason, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you in the next episode.